Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
If you've listened to Renegade Thinkers Unite for a few episodes, you know I've lined up some rock stars of the marketing world to share their insights. And that's a fairly logical, if not expected, course of action for podcasts about marketing. But in this episode, we're going rogue. We're actually going to talk to a rock star. I met Will Dailey last year at a content marketing conference and was intrigued that a singer-songwriter would have such a clear understanding of marketing, personal branding, and storytelling. And Will, by the way, is a 3-time winner of the Boston Music Award for Best Singer-Songwriter, and his songs have been featured on more than 50 shows and films. He's performed in studios with the likes of Eddie Vedder, Sheryl Crow, and Roseanne Cash. So I am really excited to have Will on the show. Will, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, so I noticed I was reading your website, of course, in preparing for our interview, and I love the fact that your website says that you have chosen to deviate from that predestined path of cogs and commercialism. Clearly, that makes you a renegade. I mean, that sure sounds like renegade to me. So let's start. Take us back to that moment when you walked away from one of the world's largest record labels. I mean, that must have been scary. And what made you believe that you could go off on your own?
Well, it was scary, and in a lot of ways it was sad because there's people that I had worked with up to that point in my career that are like, well, if you're not going to be in this system, I don't know how to work out of this system, so we won't be able to work together anymore. And it was it was a parting that none of us wanted to have, but I knew my career was not going to flourish in that system. And I'm not putting down the system of major labels. It's just that I knew I didn't belong there as an artist. And I saw so many artists doing so much great work through direct contact to their fans, which if we're going to have all this connectivity and not take advantage of it, why do we have it? And especially when it comes to music and art, that is our connectivity. That is the thing that makes us all feel one and the same. And how we can understand someone who doesn't speak the same language as us, we can understand them through a song or a painting or a film. And with our technology now, we're allowed that connection. And I don't know if we fully understand yet and appreciate the ability we have to participate in art. And I just tried to take advantage of that from day one, once I got independent, and just communicate that day after day. Even in my performances, I'll say this next song is from my album, and that album was made by fans. And it sounds somewhat overplayed now. It sounds like everyone's used to crowdfunding, but it's more than crowdfunding. It's creating art together, you know.
So it's really interesting because I got a call the other day from a CMO who was working on a book with a CEO, and we talked about the marketing of a book. And if you go to a traditional publisher today, they'll say to you, well, what's your platform? How many fans do you have in your email database? Right. How many of them can you call to sort of engage? And it almost doesn't matter what form of art or publishing or anything that you do, you sort of have to bring your own fan base to the table. And the irony is that, a record company only wants you if you have a fan base, and then it used to be, well, you could only get a fan base if you have a record company. But now,
True.
Obviously, you can build your own fan base. So let's just start there and talk about how you built your fans and how you stay connected with them.
Well, a lot of years of bread and water when you're an artist is just in a van and playing shows. And, the internet was always there in my career, so that there was that ability to connect with any of these social media platforms, or really getting an email and a zip code of a fan and letting them know that they have the power to be responsible for the art that you make. And I always tell the story of Vincent van Gogh. Everyone knows Starry Night, right?
Yep.
Everyone knows It's a screensaver. It's a dorm room poster. It makes millions and millions of dollars a year everyone traveling around the world, from around the world to see it. Okay? And we all give credit to Vincent van Gogh. But the only reason that exists is because of Theo van Gogh. Because he paid for the paint. He paid for the canvas. He paid for every hospital bill that Vincent had, every drop of food that he ate, every rent check, everything, with a weekly check to his brother. Because he believed in him and because he loved him. And that's why we have that art that flourishes today, that makes money for economies today. And in my last statement to my fans, I said, long after our concerns of right now are done, the art that we make is going to be flourishing hundreds of years from now. And
it's a wonderful thought. It's poetic, I have to tell you. That is.
Well, it is poetic, but it's also true. I mean, take music out of an NFL football game. Take music out of anything. Take art out of anything. It's humanity's equity. So if we tell people that they have power over creating that, it's not just giving them the power of I'm power of the creator, but the power of participating in an economy and being responsible for something that exists. And I think a record label was 5 guys in a room deciding if we're going to hear something. But now you can be the reason that we all hear something.
So we're talking, I get the role that the fans play in terms of, in your feelings of that you're sort of co-creating with them. Let's talk a little bit about what the marketing is of the Will Dailey brand and how you think about your brand and what that stands for, and how do you market Will Dailey?
Well, first of all, we always make sure we're responsible for customer acquisition and making sure that we are taking care of that customer. Like they're walking into our restaurant, when on their way out, we hope they come back for another meal. So that's email, zip codes, if we can, direct to customer purchase as much as possible. And that's kind of eliminating, Apple and record stores and everything, but that gives us the most longevity. Right. And then within that gives us the tool to drive the brand, which is, it's based off of everything I've been saying, the independent spirit and the spirit of connectivity, plus the fact that there's the art. And the art for me has always been an interesting thing because in music, I remember when I first got into that major label, and to your point, they're like, okay, how do we market you? And I first thought of myself as a songwriter. So if I wanted to write a folk song, I wrote a folk song. If I wanted to write a song that was really loud and had a lot of feedback in it, I just did it. But it ran into some problems when you're in a large company and they need to find a way to market that. But now I've had enough of a track record that my brand is actually the guy who does what he wants and writes what he wants. And the last album, National Throat, just had, I think my favorite review was, no matter which genre Will Dailey's in, it's authentic. So that's kind of where I kind of get to now enjoy the fruits of that labor, which was a harder brand to sell when you're in a label that needs to be rock, or it needs to be hip hop, or it needs to be pop.
Right. We need to know what chart to put you on. We need to know what stations to push you on. We need to have a way of classifying you. And you went at this and said, wait a second, I'm not that kind of, I refuse to be classified that way. And it's funny because your music does span so many, I would say, so many genres. And so, and as a result, it's sort of multi-generational. There's songs that I hear that I go, oh my God, I love that song. And because it sort of feels to me, I'll just say, it feels the rock and roll that I, grew up with. And then there's some other songs that I go, you know what? I really want my son, who's big into sort of this kind of music, I want him to hear this. So right. You do, so it must be a very interesting fan base. I mean, you must have sort of broad folks that aren't stuck in genres to be able to.
It is.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and it's fun, and it is scary because sometimes we're going through press and the folk magazine won't write about you because there's only 2 folk songs on your record, or there's only 2. But I grew up listening, I thought like Led Zeppelin 3 is this great record, or Sticky Fingers by the Stones, or Verses by Pearl Jam, which had like punk rock songs and folk songs. or blues songs and folk songs on it. All these things, those are the records that I love. The ones that kind of took you on a journey or interrupted your train of thought sometimes. So that's what I'm always searching for when I'm creating. And I think we're right now where I'm at, kind of reclaiming my career. That kind of brand is actually a genre, or actually part of the story. That what you just said is part of the story and part of the joy that I hope someone has when they listen to my music and why they listen to it too.
Very cool. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we're going to talk about his last album, Natural Throat, the next album, but we're really going to zero in on what it means to build a brand and how you use storytelling to get there. So stay tuned.
Renegade Thinkers Unite is brought to you by Social Media Explorer, the website that explores the world of social media from the inside out. Great advice from today's leading social media columnists and experts at socialmediaexplorer.com. That's socialmediaexplorer.com.
Okay, we're back with Renegade Thinkers Unite. I'm here with rock and roll musician, artist, amazing rogue musician Will Dailey, who I have seen perform not just in front of large audiences, but I had the pleasure of watching Will perform outside at the top of a building in Las Vegas, which was just crazy. And it was about 7 or 8 of us who had one of the treats of a lifetime. And it's amazing to watch you engage and sort of adapt. And so I guess the first question, because a lot of my listeners are marketers, and so they're really interested in how you built your brand and how you work with brands. So let's talk about, I know you've worked with a couple of brands and have had some really interesting experiences. Tell us a little bit about how you approach working with brands and how you make sure it's good for you and good for them.
There have been occasions where I've said no, but a brand that I do work closely with is Bose, and they're a Massachusetts-based company, and I'm still based out of Boston, so it's easy to take meetings and spend time with them, and that's an easy match. They make things that help music sound great,
right.
And they make a lot of PA systems for clubs, for giant shows, for theaters, all the way down to a home show. So I get involved in all that, and it's just a soulful thing because they came to me, and it really came down to authenticity. And it really came down to, well, if they're going to invest in me, they got to know that I'm a worthwhile investment in that what I do is also entwined with what I say and what I sing. And that, especially with music, someone could have a quick hit, someone could have a quick little moment and just be done. Because it's a lot of work. It's a scary vocation. And I have a good track record, so it's a wise investment for them. And then I also have a lot of fans that take action. Like if I do a call to action to my fans, it results in traction. And that's something that I got to be honest, I stumbled upon. Because for the beginning of my career, it was shows, it was concerts, it was fans, then it was, you get some TV syncs and some movie syncs, and those things were going great. And then that world got saturated, the TV and film thing. Just everyone was at home, then just trying to make music and get it on TV and film. And I just kind of went the other way, and all of a sudden I found, wow, I'm working with all these brands. I work with Harpoon Beer. Recently just did a campaign with Boston Harbor Distillery. I'm talking to you on Ivero headphones right now, So it all comes down to the authenticity and also the reach, because we focused on, me and my manager, we focused on customer acquisition, direct to customer sales. And so if I have a call to action, those people can depend on me.
So it's really one of the nice things that your brand represents is the ability to actually engage with, if you will, the product. And a lot of brands are very distant. They want to, be connected with their consumers, and they all talk about it, but they don't actually live it, right? And I think you actually live it. And of course, as an individual who is a brand, it's a little easier. You're a person, you live. But I want you to share some of the ways that you interact with your customer. You probably take them for granted, but brands don't. They don't think the way you do as a human. So tell me about the kinds of things that you do to take care of your customers.
Number one is you say thank you, and then usually, especially since National Throat, everything I've made is because of them. So National Throat in New England, we got Album of the Year. And, simple things like you email all the people who've ordered that directly or pre-ordered it, which is the real key. The people who are pre-ordering it are providing you the capital to make it. And also the kind of like the spiritual energy to make it. When there's 1,000 people are excited to hear something you haven't even made yet, that's pretty incredible. And, so saying thank you is huge. And when I got that award, here's your award, send out a picture of it, those simple gestures, which are true, go a long way into building that. And then with art, you have the advantage of building something that they're going to connect with, hopefully, or take that ride. And that is kind of the greatest oil to the whole machine, is that they're getting this thing that's living and breathing, and they can then say, hey, I pre-ordered this album and was kind of a part of making it, and that you give it to somebody. Just like everyone made mixtapes. Everyone shared a 45 in 1950, like, take my 45, I love this band. And then in the 1980s, they made mixtapes. Take this mixtape, I made it for you. And then they made CDs, I made it for you. That feeling of giving music to somebody is incredible. And then when you can, now, the music you give to somebody could be the music that you helped make. So that is an important part of the brand, and especially with art, that gives you, I want to say extra power, but it's really extra connectivity. Because
there's so many good aspects of what you've just said that I could break down into marketing some thoughts, and I will at the end. We've been talking about you and your music, and I want to make sure that if someone has never heard Will Dailey, what song should songs should they listen to? Do you want to play something now? I mean, I don't know. I don't
know if it'll come through this phone, but that's based on what we've said prior. It's funny because, like I said, I could tell them one song, but it might not be the song they connect with. But what I like about the people that have heard my music, and when I get into conversations about it, is that I feel like I do have a song that someone can connect with, even if they only like indie music, even if they only like punk rock or whatever. But
try to play something now. Let's see if it works.
Let me get a guitar out.
So while you're getting a guitar out, I can sort of while you're talking, I can talk a little bit about some of the things that I heard you say that I think is so interesting. When you say thank you to your customer, it's an amazing moment, right? You're thanking them for buying your product. You're thanking them for participating. What Will does is it gives them a chance to be part at the beginning. Crowdfunding is an interesting area. Lots of artists have turned to it, but I have noticed that brands have also turned to crowdfunding. And what that means for those folks that are early participants in the process is huge. And I think we all want to, when it comes to music, I know I do. I have friends from college who really tried to make it as musicians, and I always felt not obligated, but excited about supporting them. And I think it's really and that's a cool and interesting part of being an artist. But I think brands can also grab onto some of that love, if you will, and do things that are lovable and give consumers a chance to participate. So, Will, sounds like you have your guitar. It sounds really good.
You can hear it. That's amazing.
I can hear it. Hit it, man. Just give us some Will Dailey.
You got it. Should be breakfast in bed, but our bed is in a breaking sky.
in the skies behind your sullen eyes, and your eyes are wet with rain. I'm sure I left a pile of crime somewhere on the path, not too far behind where I'm walking now, though I cannot see or understand them today. This could be the perfect day to prove to you that I can still be the ultimate companion, be the ultimate companion, be the ultimate companion, be the ultimate companion. This could be the perfect day to prove to you that I can still be.
Yay! Wait. Amazing.
Did you hear that?
I could hear it. It was amazing. I'm so, it's, you know, I'm like a one-man fan band right here in my closet where I record. I'm like rocking out to this. It's amazing. So
that's funny. These
so
Uvera
fun.
headphones are good.
Yeah, no, they killed it. So, you know, I just want folks to know that, you know, you've been compared and performed next to artists like Neil Young and Willie Nelson and Dave Matthews and John Mellencamp, and you are a really stunning artist, and so I'm just thrilled that you did that, and that was really cool. So, and you were talking about taking care of your fans, and this. You have a new album that you're working on, literally that you're just starting. Tell me about how you conceive your fans playing a role in this beyond funding it.
Yeah. Well, ever since 3 years ago, we put out National Throat, and 700 fans pre-ordered that before it even came out. Okay, and that gave us the capital to make it, which in music terms or even film terms or everything. Every music album or film that came out prior to this being allowed as a choice, the thing came out in the red, which is a huge stress. And if you got to walk out on stage and perform and put your heart on the line, that balance in the red can sometimes weigh on you, especially if there's a person knocking on the door saying, "You're in the red still, we haven't sold enough." So to have something that's made and just earning on day one and not in debt gives it this freedom to just be. And so when I witnessed that, I just thought, okay, my only focus now is celebrating this process. And crowdfunding isn't even the right word. It's building. It's something else. And maybe I don't have it or I can't think of it right now. I got to check what I've written down on my website and stuff. But, you know, with this new one, I now have the evidence to show people, look what happened when we did it together. There's no such thing as DIY. There is no such thing. Nothing was ever created in a vacuum. I go back to the Van Gogh thing. That wasn't just Van Gogh, that was Theo Van Gogh as well. And so now with this new one, we're 5 days into just starting the campaign, and in 5 days we go in the studio. So the people doing it now don't even have a visual of what we're about to do, but they've done it. I think about 150 people have done it so far. And when we get in the studio and they start seeing images, then a lot more people do it. And hopefully we get to, 1,000 people this time or 1,400. And they see what it takes. They see the energy that went into it. And I get to say, look what happened last time. That album won 5 Album of the Year awards, charted on Billboard. We have 10 million spins on Spotify. I never had that when I was on major labels.
That's amazing. Right?
So what can we do this time? What can we build this time? What's going to happen to this one? Look what happened the ride we took last time. What can we dream this time? And also reminding them how it feels. And I remember being in the studio last time, and my tour manager, she was monitoring everything and would tell me, 10 people just did it in the last hour. And the feeling of those 10 people while you're tracking, it's an amazing connectivity. And we're being told 2 things right now, that we're in a divided time, right? And that we have ultimate communication. And I would argue that we are not really that divided. We're almost over-connected. that we are too aware of each other. We are aware of who's getting married, who's breaking up, what they're having for dinner, who's suffering, who's struggling, who's succeeding, and all these things. And what we're not doing enough is using that connectivity to build new things. We are over-involved in the panic and not utilizing the great tool before us. Now, I'm only a songwriter. I'm not saying I'm changing the world by making one album. What I'm saying is I am not letting that muscle be atrophied. And I'm using these tools of marketing in front of me, which are soulful tools, especially when it comes down to art. And that muscle is getting strengthened.
So I have a couple of other questions for you, but I want to ask, because I ask every one of my guests this, and the answers are always interesting. What's the toughest lesson you've learned when it comes to marketing the Will Dailey brand?
Timing. Timing's a tough lesson.
And what's that mean?
Well, you can have done everything right. You can set everything up. You can have done all the hard work. You can have a great product. But, right now everyone's in a panic. So it's hard to say, hey, let's go make some art and see what happens. Or if you're an independent artist, timing matters because you really can't release a record other than August or January, February, because the market's taken over by artists that have a lot more money. Starting in September, the Bruce Springsteens and Lady Gagas of the world will release something to get the holiday sales or the holiday attention. So, and there's also a thing within the Grammys that if you release in October, it doubles your chances. So you have only these little pockets of window time, and so timing matters there. You could do a big announcement to your fans on email, and time of day matters to when they might open it. You could do a big announcement and you have your socials ready to go. You and your team have done some work, and then something happens in the world, whatever it may be, that just takes away all that work. And when you're independent, you don't have anything to fall back on,
So just finding that right time. And that sounds a little bit, that's just getting, if you will, lucky after you've done everything else right. I've heard, I want to wrap up this for the listeners, put it back in the context of marketing, and then I'll come back to you for, how people can get in touch with you. But I'm really thinking about this. I'm intrigued by this, national trend. We have all these mass brands, and so the counterbalance to that is what some people call the makers movement, where lots of people, whether it's at Etsy or other things, are building things on their own. And what they look for, and this is what your brand embodies, is this authenticity, this homemadeness, if you will, whether it's a jam or a piece of art. And what the lesson that you provide in the way you manage the Will Dailey brand, I think, is profound and important for any brand today to be authentic, to have a consistent story, but also to be able to tell that story. And I having tracked you now in various contexts for a year, I can tell you that you are consistent in the way that you use stories to tell your story, and also that the story you tell, they add up to a brand that you can count. I know what the Will Dailey brand is, and I may not know what type of genre music, but I do know that your heart and soul and your commitment to your fans are gonna be in there. And so that thing of wrapping it up by taking care of the customer is, just saying thank you it sounds so obvious, but I have to tell you how many brands sort of forget that as they're so busy worried about telling their own message. They forget that. So there's something wonderful about a brand that, can think small, can think authentic, but, and here's the key thing, you know more about direct marketing and content marketing than most brands. You've nailed it down to email and zip code. And with those two things, you can sustain the Will Dailey brand because of what you do with those. And if you read Content Inc., for those of you content marketers, I want you to think about Will Dailey in the context of that. And you realize, oh my God, he's nailed it, with just intuitively nailed the notion of, I build my email list, I get their zip code, and then I take care of that customer, and it boomerangs back to me. So, Will, I found this really, really instructive. I want to help you tell me where folks can find you and how they can connect with you, and what they should do next to be part of your world.
Well, the first thing you can do is go to willdailey.com. You just got to spell Dailey, Dailey, and fit all the vowels you can fit into Dailey, and you'll find me. Or if you pop me into Google, I'll come up, Will Dailey. Yeah. And I mean, the first thing I'd say is, check out the campaign that we just started and consider taking this ride, because I can say all I want about the music and how great that's going to be and all that, but it is an experience, and it is a wholesome experience and a human experience. And like I said, it fights that atrophy of feeling disconnected or hopeless, especially when you're making art, and hopefully by the end of it, you're going to have an album that you love. But if you're in the content marketing and brand marketing, you'll see how we do it.
That's awesome. And you have one fan who is part of the program right now. Minute we finish this interview, you're one step closer to funding the next album. So, Will, thank you so much for being on Renegade Thinkers Unite, and best of success to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.